Chipped ham and football. That's what Pittsburgh does. What's up, everybody? Brian Batko with you once again here on the show from the Post-Gazette Sports YouTube channel and podcast network. Thanks for checking us out, as always, on this show with guests every week. This week, we're going to be joined by Lindsay Rhoades, co-host of the Sumer Sports Show with former Falcons GM Thomas Dimitroff. She also hosts the Fantasy Dirt podcast from Sports Illustrated. She's a great Twitter follow. Lindsay _Rhoades. I'm sure you've seen her out there. We're going to talk about that Steelers win over the Jets on Sunday Night Football. Spin it forward a little bit, as we tend to do. So looking forward to the conversation, getting her perspective on this team. And as always, we're brought to you by Pella. No better place to get new windows and doors installed in your home than from Pella, who can help you save on your energy costs year-round. Schedule a free in-home consultation with your local Pella windows and doors to find that right product for your home and your budget. Give Pella a call at 866-593-1560 to discuss that project further. That's 866-593-1560 to get started planning on your new windows and doors installation with Pella Windows and Doors of Pittsburgh. We will be right back with Lindsay Rhoades on this week's show. All right, and there she is, Lindsay Rhoades, co-host of the Sumer Sports Show and Fantasy Dirt podcast. She's a great Twitter follow, or X follow, I should say. I've been following you on there for a while. How's it going, Lindsay?
Great. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, we always try to get the 30,000-foot view of the Steelers from afar, try to get different guests that we've never had on here so that, our listeners and viewers can at least get some different opinions than what's going on in the local media ecosystem. So I know just from, DMing with you a little bit to set this up that, you aren't necessarily someone who thinks the Steelers are suddenly contenders after that game from Russell Wilson Sunday night, and aren't necessarily pretenders. But to you, do you feel like they're maybe like you need to see more before you say they're not going to be stuck in NFL purgatory for another season here?
Yeah, I feel like I'm kind of neutral on them, which I don't know if that's what Steelers fans want to hear, right? Like
They've been for a while, for sure.
A little bit, yeah. And the thing about the move to Russell Wilson, which I think is, it certainly looks like a more interesting one after last night than it did prior to last night. Obviously, Mike Tomlin's feeling a little bit, I don't think he was feeling particularly one way or the other, right? Like as you well know, I don't think he cares what we think. But
and we are recording this. I'll say just for a note, we're recording this Monday night. This will run Tuesday. So if the Steelers make a big move for a wide receiver or something, we didn't know that at the time, but just putting it out there. So
now that's on my radar in a way that it wasn't before. If you're feeling like we need to preface this conversation with that.
The big fish are already out of the pond now with Devontae Adams and Amari Cooper. But this team's receiving core is, doesn't really strike fear in many hearts other than George Pickens.
So. Well, that was part of my Justin Fields thing last week was like, he's not doing that poorly for Justin Fields, right? And I realized nobody likes hearing that asterisk after the sentence when it's their quarterback, but he's a developmental quarterback, right? Like there's an element of, I think the whole Russell Wilson, Justin Fields thing where you have to zoom out a little bit and go, what are we trying to accomplish here? Like, what are we looking for? Are you just looking to maybe have a slightly better chance to win a game, or do you want to become a contender in the long term? And if it's a contender in the long term, then I think that the move to Russell Wilson feels a little bit short-sighted, because I think that the thing with Justin Fields is that you look at him as somebody who has a whole bunch of unproven, like we don't know what the ceiling is. And maybe they feel like they do know what the ceiling is, right? But I think that that's the thing that we're attaching to Justin Fields, is that you understand you're developing him. We understand he's an imperfect quarterback in different ways, but kind of similar to when you look at Anthony Richardson in Indianapolis. He looks terrible in a lot of ways in games this year, but you don't pull him off the field or abandon. You might pull him off the field. You don't abandon ship, where he's
you don't
concerned.
pull the plug. Yeah.
Right, exactly. You fully realize that, like, when you watch him, anyone with eyes that's watched an NFL game understands that, like, he does things that are so special and hard to find. I'm talking about Anthony Richardson now, right? With the arm, with the legs, like, the tools are all there. Now, is he a great NFL quarterback? Not at all, right? There are some pretty basic NFL quarterback things that he does from a technique standpoint, whatever, that need a lot more developing. So he needs reps, right? He needs to be. I wish that he'd gone to a team like, a Jordan Love type situation where he could sit on the sideline for a couple of years, develop, and then bam, put him in, and we get to see him at his finest. To a degree, I feel that way about Justin Fields also. There are some things that he clearly doesn't do well that are basic quarterbacking type things, right? The processing isn't necessarily there. We're not seeing the field the way that we want him to see the field. But there are some things that he does well that you look at and you go, God, it's hard to find someone who can do that, right? Like, and a lot of it is with his legs. But so there's part of it with him where I'm thinking, I want him to be developed. And maybe he is fully developed and this is the best that we're going to get out of him.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Could be the
But
ceiling. Who knows? Yeah.
you're looking at him and Russell through totally different prisms. Russell is clearly on the downslope of his career. And so what are we getting from him? Are we getting the best Russell that we're ever going to get? You're not on an upward trajectory. And so that's partially why last week I was like, I don't understand this move because
I was with you. Yeah, I was saying the same thing. Not everybody in Pittsburgh media was, but I was. So I was, impressed, surprised by what he did. It seemed like, to get back to what you were saying there, maybe raise the ceiling, at least in the short term, for this offense and the guys around him.
I guess my concern is I don't know how much, because so I wasn't that impressed by him. Obviously, they won the game, and you have everyone's feeling good about it after the game, and you go into post-game press conferences and everybody's feeling good because it went our way. But I was a little bit surprised that the narrative coming out of it was like, Tomlin was right. We're all so stupid. Like the early concession to that. And I'm not saying that he's not right and that we know that. I don't know yet. I'm not totally convinced. I didn't see anything from Russell Wilson that felt that different from what we saw from Russell Wilson last year. And the problems for me with Russell Wilson is that I think he's a little bit limited in terms of his drop back game. I don't think he's a particularly good drop back quarterback. I don't think he's going to stand in the pocket and go through his reads. And maybe you just don't even care. Maybe you just aren't even looking for that from him in this offense. But I reached out to a couple former quarterbacks today to gauge their responses, kind of to check myself, honestly, because I wanted to see if my lack of enthusiasm was take bias, because I did go into it thinking that it was a bad call, kind of, and I didn't totally get it. And I don't love Russell Wilson at this stage of his career. I think both of them kind of thought that it was an average performance, agreed with me in that regard. One suggested that it did look a little bit similar to what Seattle did with him in terms of creating one-on-ones for him on the outside and letting him just play catch with his receivers. And you actually tweeted out his passing chart that demonstrates that very, very well. There is nothing up the middle.
It's just like F George is down there somewhere, which, I mean, hey, that in some ways is an upgrade over what the Steelers had been doing offensively. I mean, they've been running through the Kenny Pickett's and Mitch Trubisky's of the world until this season. So it's all relative.
But were the downfield throws Russell or were they George Pickett? In this particular small sample size, to me, they looked like George adjusting and making those plays happen, not Russell Wilson, like just beautiful ball, hits him right where he needs it. Aaron Rodgers, I thought, looked kind of terrible last night, honestly. But I thought that
his best throw, I think, was picked off because it just bounced off Garrett Wilson's chest and boom, it was going the other way down to the goal line.
And Beanie Bishop looked, I mean, what a play. But I think there were at least a couple of instances in the game where he just like hit the guy right in stride. And in that sense, you're like, that was a pretty ball. Like, I didn't necessarily see that from Russell. It felt like there were a handful of his completions that looked like decisions that he'd probably made pre-snap because he got the ball out so fast. And that's fine, if it works. There were also a handful of throws where he bailed pretty quickly, and he throws on the run a lot without a platform. I didn't see anything. I think that was actually what Peyton hated so much in Denver, is that he just wanted a quarterback who would stay in the pocket, go through his reads, run the offense that he wanted to run. It wasn't like Russell can't do anything well. He just isn't the quarterback that does what he wanted done in his offense. And so I did see some headlines today, Tuesday or Monday, that were like, oh, Sean Payton's the quarterback whisperer and Mike Tomlin's the one that got that game out of him. And I don't think that that's necessarily fair, because Sean Payton just wanted something very different out of his quarterback than what we got even out of Russell yesterday. I don't think that that was what Sean Payton was looking for in a quarterback. So I don't know. I feel like I didn't think that the Jets played particularly well on defense, though, in general, 50,000 foot view, we think of them as a pretty good defense. I didn't think they looked like it last night. And I wonder if there isn't, like, once you run into a better opponent, if what we saw last night isn't good enough to get it done. And the one thing, so I went and I looked at a lot of these, like the advanced numbers, just to see, where is the difference between him and Justin Fields. And one of the things that did pop was the tight window throw percentage. Russell threw into tight windows way more frequently. It was like 31% tight window throws. And I think that Justin's highest of the season was 16%. And so you could make the argument that he's willing to throw into tight windows and just let George and Pat Freiermuth and some of these guys just make a play. Like, he's going to give you a chance. But you can also see a scenario where that flips and suddenly the tight window throw turns into a meltdown game where there's a couple of turnovers, and now we're having a very different narrative on the other side of the game. So I just, kind of like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's a good point too, that the psychology of it, it's like, all right, so Justin started the first 6 games. He knows Russell's lingering there. He's looming with the calf. Now Russ, he gets this shot, and it's kind of like, what do I have to lose? Mike could decide to go back to the young buck regardless, so I might as well let it fly. And after shaking off some rust early in that game, that's exactly what he did. We're chatting with Lindsay Rhoades here on the Chip Hammond Football Show. Also brought to you by Goldberg, Persky, and White. If you were diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer, call your local attorneys at Goldberg, Persky, and White for a consultation. For over 40 years, their firms represented thousands of lung cancer and mesothelioma victims. Call 1-800-COMPLEX or gpwlaw.com for that consultation. So, Lindsay, I think that's all really well said, and a lot of angles to this. There could be some regression at some point, but at least for one game, it all worked in concert. Russ had command of things that go beyond the throws. As somebody who's also very, very deeply into the fantasy side of things, and the week-to-week world of that aspect of the NFL, how much are you buying Najee Harris right now after back-to-back 100-yard games and holding off the Jaylen Warren charge, at least for right now, even though, I was surprised to see Warren out-snapped him by 2, I think, and yet obviously Najee had the efficiency on his side once again against the Jets.
Yeah, Najee did. He's been on a heater these last couple of weeks, right? Because I think that in my head, I have Najee kind of locked in as like he's a 10-point a game back from a fantasy standpoint. Like, he has a very high floor.
Kind of as he's been since his rookie year. Yeah.
Yeah. The volume is there, but there's not a lot of from a PPR standpoint, you're not a ton of use in the passing game and not a lot of touchdowns scored. And so, you're looking at 10, 12, maybe he'll give you 12, something like that. So these last couple of weeks have been certainly better for him. I do think that might be one of the things that Pittsburgh is thinking of in the turn to Russell, is kind of what was the formula in Seattle. Like I said, if you're throwing it outside and just letting him play catch with the receivers with some one-on-ones created outside, and then you've got the run game, and they did a really good job of effectively establishing a rhythm between that, like him up the gut, them out to the sides. As
play action was working really well.
Yeah. So it felt like the play calling was pretty good in terms of putting it all together. And then obviously riding a strong defense. It feels a little Seattle-y, right? In terms of when Russ was there before. So maybe that's the idea here, is that they just kind of want to get that going again and see if that works. I don't know where Pittsburgh fits into the big picture, though, with all of this. If they don't, if they go make a move at wide receiver, now we're talking about a totally different situation, especially who is it?
There's not much left.
Coincidentally, Deontay is the name that everyone's throwing around, right? Like not to Pittsburgh, but just in general. Right. Everybody's like Deontay Johnson could be somebody that, like the Chiefs or whoever could go get.
Yeah, he threw some shade at Andy Dalton. I saw that. We had him here for 5 years, and I had plenty of midweek and post-game pressers with Deontay. Sometimes the filter left him, and he just kind of got up there and said what was on his mind. So yeah, it seems like it's been rough going for him in Carolina as expected. He got a brief little bump from the Dalton switch, but yeah, it seems like he's back to being
that
down.
Bump fell off. That bump went the other direction this week. It was a rough one.
Maybe he'll reunite with Juju in Kansas City. Who knows?
Well, that would be interesting. Looking at the AFC though, which obviously is where Pittsburgh is, like I think that weirdly the last few years have been all AFC. Like that's where it is. Those are the teams that we're most interested in. I think that the most exciting football is being played in the NFC this year. Love Detroit. Love Minnesota, that game. I mean, I think, obviously Minnesota lost, but I thought that they looked so good and it did nothing to dissuade me from thinking that they could be a contender. You've got Tampa playing as we speak, so who knows where that one's going to go, but I think that they've looked really good. Baker's been incredible. And then you've got Washington. I mean, for crying out loud, Green Bay and Chicago, and I'm not saying Chicago's going to go to the Super Bowl or anything like that, but right now they're in the playoff mix if the season ended today. Yeah. And they're interesting. And then you've got the AFC where you've got Kansas City doing it with smoke and mirrors. I don't even know how they're winning all these games. They don't look particularly good, but they're undefeated. Houston looked awful yesterday. In a lot of ways, they're 5-2. I mean, CJ Stroud was a disaster. And
they still find a way. Yeah.
Right. And Buffalo looked good yesterday, much better yesterday. For a while, they looked pretty bad, but they've looked bad this year. Baltimore, I think, is probably the team that in the AFC, but the pass defense, you could throw on them.
They play them twice. They've had Lamar's number at times over the years. So it's going to be an interesting second half for the Steelers. All their divisional games, Lindsay, are in the second half of the season. They don't even play.
That's incredible.
Until after the bye. So,
and what's nuts is Cincinnati in terms of some of the advanced stuff. Cincinnati's offense pops in a way that I found somewhat shocking. I was looking through some AFC stats today, trying to figure out what we should talk about on the Sumer Sports Show tomorrow. And I think that the AFC is an interesting topic of discussion because everybody's talking about the NFC teams, but who is good in the AFC? And frankly, we're sitting here talking about the Steelers and whether or not I'm excited about the Russell Wilson. They're 5-2, as you well know. So it's it's there. It's there for the taking for a lot of teams on this side of things that aren't really getting a whole lot of national love or aren't really blowing us away, but there's an opportunity there for a lot of these teams. And so who's going to take advantage of it? I think, Cincinnati's defense has been a different story, weirdly, but the offense is it at the top of the NFL in a lot of offensive categories in terms of advanced metrics. The Bengals are 8th in EPA per play. They are 5th in EPA per pass. Nowhere to be found EPA per rush. But I feel like, I wouldn't have, if without looking at those numbers, I wouldn't have thought that. I wouldn't have guessed that. They wouldn't have even been, if you gave me 15 guesses, I don't know. The Bengals are a team that I would have guessed would have been in the top 10 in those two categories.
Yeah, the talent is rising to the top for them. They just got to get it figured out on the defensive side of the ball. And, we'll see what goes on there. Well, the last thing I'll throw at you, we just talked about kind of balance of power between the two conferences. And like you said, Steelers, I think nationally at least sort of a quiet 5-2. And now they get the Giants coming here next Monday night.
6-2, so 6-2.
I was going to say, they can't lose to the Giants, right, Lindsay? I mean, they can't. I mean, it's a week-to-week.
I wouldn't recommend it.
I mean, they beat the Browns, but that's suddenly the Steelers are glad they get the Browns twice in the second half of the season.
Yeah, the Giants were very bad. I mean, that was a rough look yesterday.
Saquon ran all over them. Daniel Jones got I guess kind of benched, but also they were getting killed, right? So
and he will remain the quarterback. Who is the quarterback?
I actually don't even know who he got benched for now that I think about it. That kind of tells you where the Giants are in the pecking. I know it's not Tyrod Taylor because I saw him throwing on the field
Yep.
in pregame for the Jets Sunday night. That's the only reason I know that. But I got to familiarize myself with the Giants now that they're coming here. And it's Drew Lock. Drew Lock is there.
Oh my God.
They acquired him this offseason. That's right. I remember watching that on Hard Knocks. Remember watching that as being part of the Hard Knocks offseason discussion with Joe Shane and company.
That game for the Giants was the 6th worst game for an offense this year in terms of EPA per play.
Okay.
Out of all of the games that every team has played.
I guess the other 5 are probably composed of the Browns and Panthers in some order. So yeah, the Giants are gonna be here playing football. We don't know who's gonna be at quarterback, I guess, but yes, I would think the Steelers, hey, and we might still be having the same conversation if they whoop on the G-men at home. Are they actually good, or are they just gonna be headed toward another 9-8, 10-7 type of season? But all you can do right now is just play who's in front of you, and it's kind of a nice soft little start here for Russell Wilson.
Yeah, it is. That is a nice runway to have because that's a very winnable game. If you don't win it, then it's the opposite of that, right? Like that's kind of
the sky will be falling and people will be miserable for 2 weeks because they have the off week.
Well, nobody overreacts to anything in the NFL, so I don't know.
Especially in Pittsburgh with this fan base.
Well, I mean, especially anywhere. Don't fool yourself into thinking that this is the only place. There's certainly a handful of NFL cities where you can fly under the radar, and Pittsburgh's not one of them, but there are a lot that will, that are in these types of roller coaster swings. I do. That is the one thing that I will just say about the Russell Wilson thing is that I do have I don't want to overreact. I don't really have a strong take about what I saw after the Russell Wilson game, as I established, but I do fear that there could be a little roller coaster that could be ahead with regards to where he is and who he is as a quarterback. I just don't know that he has I don't know that he's the quarterback that beats the good teams.
Yeah. I mean, hey, in this division, especially this conference, Steelers have the Ravens twice, Bengals twice, Chiefs, Eagles all after the bye. So that's what Mike Tomlin's trying to figure out. That was a big part of going to him now. So anything else you want to add, Lindsay, before I get you out of here?
I don't know. I think TJ Watt's fun to watch.
TJ Watt is, he actually, I mean, that was the rare case Sunday night where he didn't do much, and yet the Steelers defense got the job done. The Steelers offense got the job done. So when you're winning games 37-15, winning the turnover battle without TJ Watt being Superman, you'll just want to bank those and count on the fact that he's going to show up more often than not. So
yeah, for sure.
All right, Lindsay, we'll tell folks where they can find you. In addition to me laying that out there at the start as well.
The Sumer Sports Show with Thomas Dimitrov. I do a podcast with him once a week, where we kind of get into a little bit of the weeds from a scouting and advanced data standpoint. And then I also do a fantasy podcast 5 days a week for Sports Illustrated. It's called Fantasy Dirt. You can get both of those podcasts wherever you get your podcasts.
And we are coming up on crunch time for a lot of fantasy teams with the trade deadline and everything. I know my teams are struggling. So we'll see. Hopefully everybody out there watching and listening is doing better than my teams are.
Well, Brian, shoot me any start sit questions that you have. We'll get that. We'll get that fantasy team fixed immediately.
I just flip a coin most of the time. I have guys who are fine, and then they get hurt in the first quarter and they're out for the game. It's like, what are you going to do? You can't do anything about that. So.
You send me your questions, and then you leave the door cracked open for me to send you George Pickens and Naji Harris related questions.
All right. Yeah, that's a good tit for tat right there. I think that's going to work out great. All right. Well, thank you so much, Lindsay, for coming on the show. Appreciate everybody out there watching Chip Tam and football. I know there's plenty of places you can get your NFL and Steelers talk. Glad you did it here today. For Lindsay Rhoades, I'm Brian Batko. We will catch you next time. Have a great rest of the week.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.